girl, it was useful for her because she learned that many ladies did not like Diana. The girl also interested others because she was at the imperial palace, which added even more respect to her person. Hestia had the advantage of a diary that recorded all the major events in the original, so that the heroine knows all the important moments that will happen. And now the girl comes up with a plan for what she will do next and how this diary can help her with this. And then the heroine remembered one moment that would certainly stun Diana and cripple her. From the very morning, Hestia was already in a hurry to Kale to tell him her plan and ask him for permission. But then the girl began to doubt whether she could just walk into Kale's room. And in the end, she simply found Uros so that he could ask everything for her. She still got to her beloved and told him that she wanted to visit the wife of the crown prince. The Marquis asked if Diana invited her or if she herself decided to visit her, to which he received the answer that the visit was Hestia's decision. After the girl told Marquis the plan, she expected his reaction, but he simply accepted it and did not say anything, even though Hestia expected any reaction from Kale other than this. Outwardly, it seemed that the hero no longer cared about Diana, and he was even surprised that for the sake of such simple news, the girl had to bother Euros. The Marquis gave Hestia advice so that she should no longer bother the servants about such nonsense, but simply come in on any occasion. This question turns out to have been raised by the butler, asking if the Marquise could come to Kale herself and not ask the servants to report this. The hero was surprised that before the heroine burst into his place without asking, and now she involves Uros in this, and therefore the butler asked his master to personally allow Hestia to come when she needs. Kaelis thought that this permission would make the Marquise happy, but he presented the information so ignorantly that the girl only became upset, and all because she decided that she was only causing inconvenience to others, because she began to bother Euros for the sake of her comfort. And then, when Kale had already decided that the girl had asked everything and was ready to leave, but before leaving, Hestia asked her husband to borrow his ring with a pink diamond. The girl began to try with all her might to persuade the Marquis to do this, promising to be careful with the ring and just for a day. But her lover replied that she should always wear this ring and gave it to her. Kale gave the girl the ring, surprising her, due to the fact that he no longer had a mistress. The diamond on this ring was chosen to match Diana's soft pink hair, and for the Marquis, it was a precious wedding gift that he wanted to give to his beloved. Hestia's gratitude cannot be described in words, because this ring was very valuable to her husband, and so he gave it to her. Kale noticed that when the heroine left to go to the saint, she had such a face as if she wanted to kill someone. The heroine sent a letter about an audience to the crown prince's wife, and almost immediately received an answer and went to the meeting. The girl came up with the perfect plan to end Helios, and also used the ring to reproach Diana. Hestia was still very happy thanks to the first gift from her lover, and she didn't care that it was originally intended for Diana. And this ring gives the heroine hope that her husband has already abandoned his feelings for Diana. Here the Marquise's thoughts are interrupted by Diana, who came and apologized for the wait. The girl's plan comes to fruition, and she already expects to see the saint's distorted face. Hestia thanks the crown prince's wife for agreeing to the meeting, to which Diana replies that it is all because of her curiosity, pretending that she is not interested in their dialogue. In her thoughts, the heroine was dissatisfied with being treated with disdain, but still told the saint that she assured her of her good attitude. And then Diana notices the same ring that was made for her, but it was received by her wife Marquise, who immediately noticed that the ring was recognized. The girl eagerly awaited the reaction of the main character, but in the end, she only received a radiant smile, as if the saint was pretending that she had not noticed anything. But Hestia cannot be fooled so easily. She still noticed that the saint was touched by the ring, and she was simply pretending to be unperturbed. Suddenly, the heroine hands Diana an envelope containing a letter for her, and in it is something that the crown prince should prepare for the future, because the girl has already proven that she can see the future. The Marquise told about enemy troops who, after checking the defenses, were going to attack the country. Last time Helios had a lot of problems because of the attack, but this time everything will be different because he was warned by Hestia. Also, last time people discussed that Helios agreed to peace under very unfavorable conditions, and Kailis would have handled it much better because he was an outstanding diplomat. The saint was surprised by the fact that such important news was told to her and not to the crown prince. To which Hestia said that she would like to know when the crown prince was going to hold the next tea party, which infuriated the saint. Diana began to say that this was too much, because the date of the tea party and its invitees were kept secret. Madame Harmony's lessons were not in vain, and the heroine was quickly able to pretend that she regretted what she said. Diana quickly realized her mistake because the information about the tea party was not even close to what Hestia brought. It turned out that the date for the tea party had not yet been chosen, but as soon as something was known about it, the saint would immediately send a letter to Kale's wife. Afterwards, Diana reminded that she is the crown princess of the country, so she will not tolerate such treatment, because you need to be more polite when addressing her. Hestia saw how much everyone's beloved saint had changed, because now she has the power that changes people. And then Diana could not bear it and asked about the ring, and the heroine immediately began to brag and praise Callus in order to put the saint in an awkward position. While the heroine was talking about how caring her husband was, and when he managed to get such a rare stone, Diana did not know whether to say that it was originally a gift just for her. Hestia noticed that the saint had turned very pale and asked if it was because the jewel the heroine was showing was not magnificent enough for her eyes, which put her in a more difficult position. The crown princess stuttered a lot while trying to answer something, and Hestia only made everything worse by saying that the color of the stone was very similar to the saint's hair. And then the Marquise allegedly guessed that this ring was intended for Diana, and shouted this in surprise, expecting a response from Helios's wife. But Diana remained silent, not talking about the fact that the ring was made for her, which puzzled the heroine. However, Hestia did not stop trying to find out information about the decoration, pretending that she was very hurt by the whole situation. And the saint hastened to reassure the Marquise, saying that Kale did not want to offend her and did not mean anything bad. Diana was cast as a villain, which was very unusual for her, and she began to apologize to Hestia. Afterwards, the crown princess thanked the heroine because she saved Kale's life, to which the Marchioness replied that she was glad that she was able to help the person dear to her. Hestia noticed how strange Diana's state had become as she squeezed out words that included a request to protect Kale as long as the heroine could. The girl was glad that she was able to piss off the crown prince's wife. As soon as the Marchioness returned, she immediately told the butler how the audience with the crown princess had gone. Hestia knows that when the Marquis is upset, he reads light novels, which once again surprised the butler with her knowledge of Kale. After the dialogue with the butler, the girl immediately hurried to tell everything to her lover, who, in turn, first of all asked about Diana. Then Callus remembered that Hestia sees the future and asked if the saint was happy in the future, and the girl was puzzled by such a question. The Marquise understands that she is not yet able to answer this question because she knows that the saint will soon cease to appear as such because she will lose her healing ability. Last time, after the death of Caelus, the country faced a crisis. The marriage of the main characters began to collapse, and Diana lost her gift, losing her status as a saint. After that, everyone turned away from the main character because she became an ordinary girl, and the crown prince paid almost no attention to her because he was tired of political issues. The girl was faced with the question of whether to tell her beloved about everything or keep it a secret. The girl was worried that Caelus might return to Diana, and he, as if reading her thoughts, replied that he no longer had feelings for the saint, but the Marquise understands that all this is just a lie. And then the heroine decided to tell her that Diana would soon lose her ability to heal and cease to be a saint, which shocked Kale. Hestia admitted that the abilities would disappear not only from the main one, but also from the girl herself, and she would no longer be able to see the future. Kale suggested that his wife would lose her abilities due to death, saying this very directly and sharply, but the heroine admitted that she was not sure about this. There are no more than 2 years left until the end of the girl's memories, but she doesn't worry about it because the main thing for her is to have time to complete all the planned tasks, and there is no need to worry about Diana because even though she will lose her abilities, she herself will be alive and well. The Marquis abruptly leaves, telling Hestia to forget about their dialogue and just leave, and because of this, the girl begins to worry that she said something wrong. Afterwards, Hestia comes to Madame Harmonia, and she notices that the heroine does not look very good, the reason for which is that the girl has not slept well in recent days, because during this time, there has been no news from either Kale or Diana. Harmony assumed that Hestia was in such a state because of her visit to the crown princess, and then the girl told the Marquise the story of the ring. Hestia said that she was worried that Diana was trying to separate her from Caelus in order to make the saint appear duplicitous in front of Madame. But Harmony came to the defense of the crown prince's wife, saying that she could not have acted so cruelly, because Diana is a loyal person who helps people, which means this is just some kind of misunderstanding. Then the heroine realized that Madame loved Diana very much, and there was no way to turn her against the saint. And in the end, Harmony decided that she would request an audience with Diana and talk to her personally to sort everything out. Madame was able to calm down and go home, but this really exhausted Hestia, and the girl went to the garden to unwind. An unexpected meeting took place in the garden because the girl ran into her beloved, who was holding a bouquet of flowers in his hands. After the heroine appeared in Cale's life, he began to feel better, and he even started doing floristry. The butler tried his best to support his master and brought him many flowers so that the Marquis would not abandon this matter. We learn that Cale received a letter from the Crown Prince, which says that thanks to Hestia's prediction, it was possible to prevent a crisis on the border and save the country. Caelus does not understand why the girl saved him when her predictions are so strong, and she spent them on a Marquis unfamiliar to her. Having met Hestia in the garden, Cale gives her a bouquet that he collected himself while he was doing floristry, and the girl was very amazed by this, because before that he had never given her flowers. And then Cale also says that he wants to say something to the heroine, and at this moment, common sense gradually begins to leave Hestia because her beloved is so good. The Marquise began to figure out where her husband got the bouquet, but she was still not ready to believe that he could give it to her. But Cale, noticing the girl's look at the flowers and deciding that she really liked them, still gives them. Hestia was so happy after this that even Uros came running to help her. This is how the girl found out that her beloved was engaged in floristry, and also that he wanted to talk to her. But seeing her condition, he decided to postpone everything until later. But the Marquise persuaded her to continue the dialogue, and now stood in admiration of the bouquets that her husband had made. But then she remembered that there were no such scenes in the novel and began to worry about it. The young man noticed the change in the heroine's mood and decided that the reason for this was her anxiety. Thanks to his thoughts, Cale began to smile, and this was noticed by Hestia, who, although she did not know why, was glad that he was smiling. And then Caelus again attempted to tell the girl important news, although she decided that their dialogue was already over. The Marquis wanted to find out information about why the girl saved him, because there must be some reason for this. As a result, a misunderstanding arose, during which Hestia decided that Cale had guessed about her love for him, and the hero himself thought that he was an important person in the future. And so there was an awkward pause, due to the fact that the heroine inadvertently revealed all her feelings to the Marquis, deciding that he already understood everything. And Caelus himself only asked why she called him her favorite and what it meant, clearly not yet fully understanding what he had just heard. Hestia realized that she had spilled the beans and now doesn't know how to get out of the situation she had gotten herself into. Caelus begins to delve into the meaning of this word, trying to understand what it means that he was called a favorite. And unable to withstand the Marquise's inquisitive gaze, the girl admits that she called him her most beloved person. The Marquise tried to get out of the situation, but it was too late, because no matter what she said, everything led to the fact that she was in love. However, the hero decided that Hestia was in love not with him, but with flowers, and promised that he would give them more often, and that's how the heroine got away with it, which she was happy about. And after that, they began a dialogue in which Cale wanted to discuss something, and as it turned out, the topic of discussion was the abilities of the Marquise. Cale began to reason that Hestia could change the present, and therefore the future, which could be very useful. If you change events one after another, the future will also change, and this is a very important moment for the characters, because everything that happened last time can change. The Marquis is still sure that the heroine saved him only because he will be needed in some important event in the future. But because of Cale's death, he had practically no effect on anything. It's just that the heroine herself decided that if he was alive, then everything would be much better, so you can't agree to his question. Due to Hestia's long silence, the Marquis decided that the heroine was simply having a hard time talking about it, while in reality, she was just figuring out what the best answer would be. Hestia admitted that nothing would have changed if she had not saved him that day, and after that, the Marquis began to think that his life means nothing and does not change anything, which means that all this is meaningless. So the Marquis again began to think about death, because he decided that there was no point in living any longer. He would not change anything and would not become an outstanding or great person. Hestia understands what Cale is talking about, because he is a minor character, which means he is not as important as the main characters, who receive almost all the attention, while the others simply end up in their shadow. But the heroine decides to convince the Marquis, telling him that he does not have to change the world in order to be great, because it is enough just to become the meaning of life for one person. Then Hestia admitted that Kale is the meaning of life for her, and she considers him great because she loves him. The butler came running to the heroine's cry, wondering what was going on with the heroes and what they were doing, and at the same time informing them that dinner was ready. And then the Marquis began to laugh loudly, surprising Hestia and the butler, who did not understand what caused the laughter. The Marquise immediately thought that in the novel Caelus laughed only next to Diana. Hestia thought he was laughing because she made herself look stupid, but she was willing to accept it as long as he was happy in the end. Stopping laughing, Kale turned to Uros and said that he wanted to ask him something, to which the butler immediately responded. Caelus's request was that the butler provide him and his wife Hestia with a pleasant dinner. But the girl was so worried that she could not even appreciate the taste of the food that was brought to her. But even in such an awkward situation, the heroine was glad that Kale laughed, and she saw him from different sides. Hoping that thanks to her, Marquis felt better. The girl thought that she would finally be able to sleep normally without worrying about anything. But when Hestia entered her room, she was so amazed by what she saw that she froze in one place, unable to move. The girl saw something that she obviously did not expect to see in her room. After all, the Marquise's room was filled with flowers, and she was surprised, not knowing what it all meant. And then the girl seized the bouquet of flowers that Kale made, and realized that it was his idea. Hestia remembered that before this, her beloved had promised to give her more flowers if she liked them so much. Now it is clear what exactly the Marquis asked the butler for, but the girl decided that it was definitely not Kale who asked to bring such a number of flowers, but Uros himself. It didn't matter whose idea it was. The heroine was pleased with such attention in any case. While Hestia was enjoying the flowers, Caelus stood in his room, thinking about everything that had happened before. And so we see the girl at work again. This time she writes a short letter about the current situation because there was no answer from Diana, and the heroine was unable to contact the Countess. It turns out that there will be a banquet, and the Marquise is not sure if they are ready to host this banquet. The letter has already been written. All that remains is to send it, and then find Uros, because she cannot sort out the flowers herself. There were too many flowers, but Hestia really likes it, because now she can constantly admire them. But instead of Uros, Hestia found only piles of papers with which the entire table was littered. Because of so many papers, the girl did not even notice at first that there was a butler among them. Uros looked very tired and sick, and all he said was that his owner should be taken care of, although he seemed to need care first of all. Then the heroine began to try to wake Uros so that he would come to his senses. When he woke up, Uros admitted that he slept less than 3 hours a day due to the large amount of work. While Hestia was worried about Uros, he was worried about the fact that he looked shameful, not even thinking that he shouldn't put such a burden on himself. Due to his master's inability to take care of his own affairs, the butler has to work on his behalf. But Hestia noticed that Uros was fine until yesterday and asked what happened. It turned out that the butler only dealt with urgent matters, and before this, there was no such thing that he slept 3 hours a day. It was surprising that Hestia made Kale laugh, because before his laughter could be heard very rarely, which means the heroine can somehow command the Marquis. And in this case, Uros invited Hestia to take care of the housekeeping on the estate, but the problem was that the girl had never done anything like that before. Later, the girl also suggested that the young man would not allow this, to which Uros said that he was ready to ask him this right now. And at that moment, the Marquis himself was holding a tea ceremony on his terrace. And as soon as Hestia found out about this, there was no trace of her because she instantly ran to her beloved. While important issues were being resolved, Caelus sat alone on the terrace and drank tea in a relaxed position. The hero asked the Marquise what happened, to which she replied that she came running because urgent questions arose. In response to this, Caelus invited the girl to drink tea with him, which he was just about to pour, which Hestia, of course, was happy about, but then realized that there was no time for that. The heroine had to run, so at the moment she could hardly say anything due to the fact that she first needed to catch her breath. When Hestia refused tea, Kale asked if she liked tea, to which she responded positively, and then began to wonder how she could refuse tea with her beloved. But the Marquise did not let her think, who told her to forget about tea and sit down, because she needed to talk. Hestia was very upset by the fact that she refused to drink tea with her loved one, but nothing could be done. And while the heroine was sad because of the missed opportunity, Kale asked her why exactly she was looking for him. Then the girl noticed that her husband's gaze softened and became less cold, and the Marquis began to look at Hestia differently. But then Hestia realized that her gaze was not soft, but simply studying, as if she were some kind of extraordinary insect. However, this look is still better than the lifeless one before, which means Kale's condition is getting better. Sitting opposite her beloved, the heroine thinks about how she would like to forget yesterday. But in the end, the girl collected her thoughts and remembered to tell the Marquis about Uros's desire for her to take care of the estate. Kailis knew that the butler had a lot of work, so he was not even surprised by this proposal, because it is difficult for Uros to do everything alone. The Marquis took this as a hint that he had been slacking off for a very long time, but the girl insisted that she wanted to help him herself. But if the hero turns out to be against it, then the Marquis will no longer demand this. Then Hestia heard Kale's confession that before he could not entrust the work to others and did everything himself. But now the Marquis lives freely and does not understand why he did not allow himself to live like this in the past. The heroine would like to lighten Kale's burden and help him in everything. It was unusual for Kale to hear this, because before that few people had shown him such care. The couple sat opposite each other, and each was thinking about something different. Ultimately, the girl managed to persuade her lover, and he allowed her to help the butler. Now Kale also decided to share his news and said that a letter had arrived from Hyperion. The girl was not happy that Helios again needed something from Kale, because last time everything ended in tears. But after seeing the text of the letter, Hestia realized that it was not written for Kailis at all. This message turns out to be for the Marchioness herself, and in it, the Crown Prince writes that he would like to meet the girl in person, because her abilities helped him a lot. The heroine wanted to use her knowledge only for her lover, and now she was thinking of simply refusing the prince's invitation. But before refusing, she decided to ask what the Marquis's opinion was on this matter. Kale does not understand why the heroine needs his opinion, but the girl explains this by saying that she is now a Marchioness, and this letter is from the Crown Prince. And the fact that they are dating in secret could lead to a lot of strange rumors. The hero was amused by the girl's confidence that he would not be able to find out about the secret meeting. The Marquise was so struck by the words spoken by Kale that she seemed to have forgotten how to breathe. After some time, the meaning of everything that her beloved said came to her, and at that very moment she was very indignant, because she did not want to do anything without the knowledge of her beloved. Hestia is also unhappy with the fact that she will have to see the Crown Prince, because he offended Kale. Kale, meanwhile, silently ponders everything that his wife just told him, and in Marquis's thoughts, there are also memories of the day when Diana confessed to him that she was in love with someone else, his best friend Helios. The saint then claimed that no one could hate the Crown Prince, and here in front of him sits a girl who cannot stand him. It was clear how difficult it was for the girl to make a choice about inviting Helios, because there was too much at stake. Meanwhile, Kailis thinks about how different Diana and Hestia are, and this makes him smile imperceptibly. The choice was made at the moment when Kale said that the girl had better go to the meeting, and then she still decided to accept the invitation. The heroine constantly calls her husband Marquis, and so he could not resist and asked her if this irritates her. The young man asks to call him by name, because no one calls Hestia the wife of the Marquis. Then there is no need to constantly call him the Marquis. Because of these words, the girl became embarrassed, and the fact that her beloved was as close as possible made the situation only worse. For the first time, Hestia addresses the Marquis by name very quietly, timidly, as if afraid of saying something wrong. And when the girl realized that nothing would happen to her for saying the name, she gave herself free rein and shouted it out at the top of her lungs. Kailis did not expect this and looked in surprise at Hestia, who was recovering from a loud scream. After this, the girl quickly retreated, leaving the Marquis alone with his thoughts. It seems that when the heroine screamed, she scared Kale so much that he even spilled the tea and only now noticed it. Hestia once again made the young man smile in these few days, which means that her plan is working and the Marquis is on the mend. Meanwhile, the girl, in embarrassment, tried to run as far away from her lover as possible so as not to worry even more. Here the attention turns to Helios, who is looking at the heroine's room like some kind of museum. Hestia is not very happy about meeting the Crown Prince, but she was forced to agree to it. Helios came not as the Crown Prince, but on behalf of Hyperion, so I had to meet him right in the room and not in the open living room. Hestia's exploration of her room never stopped, and she was already starting to get very angry about it. Then the Crown Prince noticed the girl's documents on the table and asked if she was responsible for the internal affairs of the Marquis, to which Hestia gave a positive answer. It turned out that the Marquis had many amazing talents, and this surprised the main character. And then Hestia was offered to use her power for the good of the country, because the heroine had already saved her once. But in response to this, the heroine only replied that she would pretend that she had not heard these words. The Marquise explained that for her now her husband's health comes first, so she is going to focus on him and running the household. Although the crown prince tried to prove to the girl that household affairs are not more important than the country's problems, the heroine said that her foresight did not concern state affairs. Then Helios asked why she told about the attack, to which the marquise replied that it was done for the sake of information about the date of Her Majesty's tea party. The main character tried to threaten Hestia, but she noticed that today she had a meeting with Mr. Hyperion, not the prince, so she had nothing to fear. According to the man, it is very selfish for the heroine to use her power only for personal gain. Hestia noticed that the crown prince abandoned his friend, who is her husband, alone, and now she can't help but think about it, because she loves Kale very much. His Highness wants to somehow take over the initiative in the conversation, because the one with whom he is conducting a dialogue does not mince words. And then suddenly, Helios starts coughing after drinking the tea, and, as it turns out, this is because the drink tastes exactly the same as when Diana brews it. Even a saint has shortcomings, for example. She does not know how to brew tea, and instead she produces tasteless water. Pass, which means that His Majesty most likely urgently needs the heroine's gift. It remains to find out how things are going with Diana's preparations for the reception, and this can be done when Hestia goes to predict. It will even be possible to talk with the servants. And then Hestia began to choose an event that could be predicted in order to go to the imperial palace as quickly as possible. But before telling Helios about this prediction, the marquise initially decided to share everything with her husband. Hestia fell asleep thinking that tomorrow everything would go as well as today. The next day, The girl did not understand how it happened that she and her lover were traveling together in a carriage. It so happened that the girl once again went to tell Kale about her plans, and he asked whether she would go to the castle. And before that, the Marquis was doing a curly haircut, which surprised Hestia because he did it well. Kale reiterated that his wife did not have to answer to him, but she explained that she did not want what she was about to tell Helios to be just between Hestia and the Crown Prince. But what should the heroine do if her lover does not want to hear what she wants to talk about? And then she added that in this case, she will not say anything. However, the Marquis was only worried about the fact that Hestia called him Mr. Keolis, which seemed strange to the man because she could simply call him by name. Afterwards, Kale wondered what information the heroine would tell the Crown Prince first, and the heroine said that it would be the news that His Majesty the Emperor would soon fall. As it turned out, the Emperor had an unknown illness, and therefore Diana poured all her healing powers on him day and night. And the moment the Emperor falls, the saint uses her powers for the last time. It was unknown whether this message could somehow prevent what was about to happen, but then everyone would be ready for any outcome. Keolis lost his parents at an early age, so together with his best friend Helios, he greatly respected the Emperor and was devoted to him. And His Majesty, in turn, considered Kale practically his own son and was delighted with him. And it was at that moment that the Marquis said that he would go to the castle with his wife. Because of this unexpected desire from her lover, the heroine was still in shock. However, the girl was not only surprised, but also very frightened, because she did not know how Kale would behave if she met Diana. The Marquis, in turn, seemed to read the thoughts of his betrothed and told the heroine not to worry about the fact that the young man's feelings for Diana would flare up again, because he was going to the Emperor and not to his past love. Then Hestia explained to her lover that it was not so important to her what he felt. The main thing was that he did not repeat the mistakes that he had made that the heroine had seen before. After all, the heroine herself may disappear in 2 years, but at the moment her goal is to make Diana and Helios regret. Kale decided that they could both go about their business and go back at different times, but the Marquise was afraid that her husband might become ill, and she would not be able to help him. This offended the man, because he is not a child, and he is not that weak, so he can handle everything himself. In the end, the heroes really went separately, and Hestia noticed that this behavior was so similar to how the Marquis behaved from the original novel. While Hestia was in the clouds, she suddenly heard a dialogue between the maids, in which they discussed the scale of Diana's tea party. The servants were unhappy with the way the tea party would be conducted, and the Marquise realized that something was clearly wrong. And then one of the workers blurted out that she was already tired of watching Madame Marope and Diana quarrel every day. Madame Marope is a lady-in-waiting who served the departed empress, and she's the most experienced figure in the palace. And Hestia was glad that Diana could not get along with such an important woman for the palace. In a good mood, the heroine went to the Crown Prince, who was surprised by such a quick visit. While the heroine was thinking about how to more carefully tell Helios information about his father, he reprimanded her, saying whether it was normal to look at others so closely when there was a husband. Due to the Crown Prince's impoliteness, the heroine stopped trying to convey the information softly and simply bluntly said that His Majesty the Emperor would soon fall. Helios began to argue with the girl, arguing that at the last examination, the doctor did not notice anything strange about his father, but Hestia added that she did not know the exact cause or day of the incident, and she simply told what she saw in the future. Then the Crown Prince asked if there was any way to prevent this, to which Hestia replied that although she could not give a guarantee, she advised always keeping someone close to the Emperor in order to immediately assist him. Although the saint used her power on the Emperor every evening, the fact of his fall confirms that every life has a deadline, even with the support of divine forces. And then the chief chamberlain of the Palace of Lilies, Zeno, appears with the words that His Majesty called him. Then Helios ordered him to immediately go to the Emperor and added that he himself would also come soon. Afterwards, the Crown Prince wanted Diana to also approach his father, but Hestia forbade him because she knew that Kale was there at the moment, and she would not want him to meet the one who broke his heart. As it turned out, Helios's wife had already gone to the Emperor to have tea with him. While the heroes hurried to the imperial palace, the Crown Prince asked Hestia whether the cause of his father's death could be poisoning, hinting at how terrible the tea Diana brews. Meanwhile, the main character of the novel was glad that she would finally be able to talk to the Emperor. And then Diana notices the last person she expected to see, because it turned out to be Kale. In the end, what Hestia feared happened, because her lover met the one he had loved for many years. After some time, the Marquise ran to the palace, and when Kale saw her, he said that he told the girl not to come for him. But then the young man noticed that the crown prince had also come running to the palace with his wife, which did not make him happy. And so the Marquis grabbed Hestia by the hand in order to leave this place as quickly as possible. At this moment, the heroine realizes that her beloved has finally met the saint. The girl couldn't even imagine what Kale was feeling right now, but she could only guess, because the man didn't show that he was in pain. Then Hestia tries to cheer up Kale, telling him that he is holding up well. But the Marquise took her words negatively, saying that the heroine knows nothing, because her ability does not allow her to see through people. And after the man's words, the girl apologized to him, knowing that Kale just needed to throw out his emotions. This evening, Hestia decided to drink a couple of glasses of wine, thinking that she should not have allowed her lover into the palace in the first place. After all, the Marquise understands that Diana was most likely careless in her interactions with the Marquis. After this meeting, Kale was silent for the rest of the time, and although Eros was looking after him, Hestia also wanted to go and see him, but was afraid. Kale's office is so close to the heroine that you can see it from the balcony, but his heart is incredibly far away. And then the girl notices that she was not the only one who came out to admire the night sky. Maybe Kaelis came out at such a late hour to kill himself again, and that's why Hestia quickly ran to him. Running to her husband, the heroine first met Uros, and he said that her lover just wanted to get some fresh air. Then, with a lighter heart, the girl was about to leave, but Kale stopped her and Uros asked her to leave. And while Hestia was nervous that the butler left her alone with the Marquis, he came too close to her. It turned out that Kale wanted to apologize to the heroine for what happened during the day, because then he was harsh with her. Shy, Hestia was still able to ask how her beloved was doing now, to which the man replied that he took a little nap, and now he is much better. Hestia is very embarrassed by how close Kale is, because this is how she sees all his beauty, and so the hero asked why she doesn't look at him, and the reason is that this will make her worry even more. And then Marquis said that he saw his wife drinking wine on the terrace, which means that he saw her inappropriate behavior when she was emotionally talking to herself and drinking straight from the bottle. But instead of condemnation, Hestia only received an offer from Kale to have a glass with him. The heroine began to feel like she was in a dream, because at the moment she was drinking wine with her beloved late at night in his office. In the end, the girl decided that since she had such an opportunity, she was going to admire Kale to the fullest. Because of her thoughts, Hestia turned all red, and then the Marquis came closer to her to find out what caused this and what happened. And then, in order to dispel the romance of the moment, the heroine asked her husband if Diana had any reaction to her meeting with Kale. In the end, the girl realized that this was not the best question, but the Marquise had already begun to tell how the saint was momentarily amazed. But then she came to her senses and began to treat her old friend as before. Then the crown prince's wife and Kale went to the emperor together, but the man hardly spoke to his majesty because the saint took all his attention. Kale was disappointed that no matter what he did, Diana still treated him the same as before, which means that all his attempts to change this were useless. Then Hestia could not stand it, and said that what is done in the name of love will never be useless. After all, Kale knows how to love, and this is where his happiness lies. And then the heroine promised that she would do everything in her power to make him happy. The girl was about to leave when Kale first wanted to say something to her, but then changed his mind. Then Hestia decided that since they wanted to tell her something, then the next day the dialogue should be continued. But the Marquise's plans were not destined to come true, because she had a lot to do, including learning land management and lessons from Madame Harmony. While the girl was lying and thinking about all her affairs, she suddenly remembered that she had forgotten something important, namely, choosing a dress for a tea party. And since all the tailors were already busy because of the tea party, Hestia decided that she would alter the dress for herself. After all, everyone at the tea party will look at the heroine's appearance, so she needs to look good, and in the end, Madame supported her in this endeavor. Harmony also offered Hestia a tailor named Decamar, who, although he looked intimidating, was good at his job. But the problem is that Decamar is from ordinary people, which confuses many, but it didn't matter to Hestia, because the main thing is skills. The heroine showed the tailor the dress she wanted to alter, and then some jewelry that might also come in handy. And after that, Decamar began to bombard the girl with questions about what she liked about dresses. But the heroine simply said that the tailor should decide everything himself. The main thing is that it looks good on her. And then Decamar suddenly began to say that he had come up with the perfect sketch, and then ran away to sketch it. While talking with Hestia, Harmonia began to say what a great girl she is and how much she has achieved. And then Madame's words struck the heroine, because Harmonia noticed that it would be good if the crown prince's wife behaved like Hestia. But even after all the rumors about Diana, Madame continued to trust her. And then the tailor burst in again with the women, saying that he had many ideas for the Marchioness. Decamar was so inspired that he made too many sketches, and then asked the heroine to choose the one she liked best. The tailor was very worried whether the Marquise would like anything, and was already beginning to think that she was dissatisfied with everything. And all this time, Decamar had his shirt unbuttoned, and when he saw this, he began to worry even more. All the sketches were beautiful, but for Hestia, there seemed to be something missing, because all the dresses looked exactly like dresses for aristocrats. And then the girl saw another design, but the tailor said that it was drawn only to stretch her hands. However, in the end, it was this sketch that the heroine chose. After some time, preparations for the tea party began, and therefore it was noisy in Kale's palace, which he really did not like. Then Euros explained to the Marquis that everyone was fussing because Hestia was going to Her Majesty's tea party, which would take place that day. And then the butler told Kale that the Marchioness had to alter her existing dress due to lack of time, even though she wanted a new one. Then the Marquis said that the heroine should have asked him for help, and he would have solved everything with money. But Hestia said more than once that she did not want to use her husband's property. In the end, the dress was ready, and the girl looked so beautiful in it that you couldn't take your eyes off it. And although everyone was worried about altering the dress, all the worries were in vain. And while Hestia thanked the tailor, the maids were surprised that the dress was made by such a person, because the dress is so elegant, which cannot be said about Decamar's physique. The design of this dress was the simplest of all those presented, and therefore they even tried to dissuade her, thinking that this was not a dress for tea with Her Majesty. But Hestia still insisted, because she wanted an elegant dress to show off herself. And so that the dress did not look too simple, it was decorated with broken mother-of-pearl shells. Although this idea was great, Dekimaru had to try very hard to bring it all to life. One could even say that the tailor put his whole soul into creating the dress. Hestia was very grateful to Dekimaru and said that next time she would turn to him for help again. And while they were talking, Kale came to them and said that the door was open. This is the first time that the Marquis himself came to his wife, so it scared her, because she thought that something had happened. Kale first looked at the dress and noticed that it didn't even look like it had been altered. And then the Marquis gave Hestia a large bag of money and told the girl to give it to the tailor, thanks to which he would then be able to open his own clothing store. As soon as Kale gave the money, he immediately left, simply saying goodbye to the heroine. Hestia is so beautiful, and her lover did not say anything to her about this, but the heroine understands that he is ready to call only Diana beautiful. But suddenly, the Marquis turned around and, looking at the girl, said that this dress suits her. However, Hestia decided that he said the compliment as a goodbye, and not because he really meant it. But the Marquise was pleased with this too, so she thanked her lover for coming to cheer her up. In front of Euros, Kale began to make excuses that he just wanted his reputation not to be ruined, and therefore went to Hestia to look at the dress, and nothing more. At the tea party, the Marchioness met Countess Arenice, who noticed that Hestia was in a good mood, and the Countess herself was in anticipation. As Arenice promised, she was going to become a loyal ally for the heroine, although she is not sure if this is right. The event itself took place in the main palace of the Emperor, because Helios listened to the girl's advice so that at least someone would be with the Emperor at all times. Then the wife of the Crown Prince of the Empire, Diana, appeared, captivating all eyes. And Hestia at this time was thinking that there might be a better day to show the true face of the main character of the novel. As it turned out, the heroine was given a place at the same table with the Crown Prince's wife because of her status as a Marchioness. Everyone was very friendly and flattering towards Diana, which Hestia really didn't like, who heard all these compliments towards the Crown Prince's wife, and the heroine understands that it will be difficult to catch the time for her speech. At first glance, everyone treated Diana very well and even admired her. Hestia tried in every possible way to make eye contact with the saint, but she failed because Diana constantly turned away. And then sweets were brought to the event, which were prepared by the Crown Prince's wife herself. From Diana's point of view, she wanted to convey her message by criticizing the luxury of aristocrats, but in this way, she would never be able to convince anyone. No matter what Diana did, everyone praised her, and it turns out that all her life the saint walked along a flower path, protected from problems. Suddenly, the Marchioness noticed that all this was done by the Crown Prince's wife in order not to forget her peasant origins. And although for Hestia these sweets bring back memories, for others they look rustic. And then the heroine asked if anything had happened to Diana with Madame Merope, because her hand was not felt here, and Madame herself was absent from the event. Then Diana began to make excuses by saying that she just wanted to do everything her own way, so that this tea party would not be like all the others. But these words did not convince the others, and in the end, only Hestia supported the Crown Prince's wife, saying that everyone would definitely understand the deepest meaning that Her Highness put into this action. After this, Diana asked the Marquise to dress more appropriately next time, showing that she could fight back against Hestia's words. The girl didn't know if she could answer Her Highness, or if she should just ignore her remark. But then, Irenaeus came to the aid of the Marchioness, making a double click on the saucer, which was a sign that Hestia could say what she wanted, and the Countess would pick it up in the right place. Then the heroine began to say that there was a misunderstanding because this dress was altered from one of her favorite outfits, and it shines due to the covering with shells, not precious stones. And although everyone was taken by surprise by the fact that this dress had been altered, its beauty overshadowed this fact. And in the end, other girls began to tell Hestia that they could not take their eyes off her. This dress was so amazing. Everyone was especially struck by the shells on the outfit, and so everyone began to ask the heroine who her tailor was. And then Hestia admitted that the tailor who created this dress was a commoner. At that moment, Irenaeus noticed that if she had not been told, she would never have thought that this masterpiece dress was created by a commoner. And after that, the Countess added that she would also like to entrust this tailor to make a dress for her. And after the Countess's words, everyone supported the idea of altering the dresses, and this puzzled Diana because a lot of money was spent on her dress. If the Crown Prince's wife was going to serve simple treats, then she should have done it in an aristocratic style, and then this idea would have been successful. But Diana made a mistake in this, and therefore no one supported her. And then the Countess asked Hestia why it was necessary to alter a commoner's outfit if she was a marquise and could create a beautiful, expensive dress for herself. And then Irenaeus clarified whether Marcus Caelus allocates a generous budget to his wife or not. Hestia did not expect this from the Countess, and therefore fell silent for a second, pondering the question. As it turned out, the heroine's surprise was feigned, because before the event, the girl agreed with the Countess that the dialogue should naturally move on to talking about Cael. Hestia began to say that as a spouse, the Marquis respects her completely, and during these words, she carefully watched Diana's reaction. When the girl said that she respected her husband, Irenaeus recalled how the Crown Prince openly criticized the Marquise's coldness. This was due to one incident where Cael wanted to help the main characters by poisoning Duke Orcus and his daughter, and therefore the Marchioness does not believe that her beloved did wrong. And then Hestia asked Diana what she thought, and whether she thought that Cael had done something wrong. But what is also important is the fact that the Marquis committed this crime not only because of dear people, but also because the Dukes of Orcus were a family that committed any shameless actions, such as selling children into slavery and killing everyone who stood up to them ways. Cael did everything himself because he forbade Helios to help him so that he would not set up the royal family. The Marchioness explained to Her Majesty that the Orcus family was dangerous for the throne because they could start a rebellion, and so the civil war was stopped. To which Diana replied that the end does not justify the means, and in any case, Caelus committed a bad act that violates the laws of the empire. And then Hestia asked why her husband was not punished, since he committed such a terrible crime. As a result, the saint found herself in a difficult situation, because there is no correct answer to the question that was asked to her. And then Countess Irenaeus stood up for Diana, saying that she was not obliged to answer anything to the question posed, because this could disturb His Majesty. Then Hestia apologized if she had offended her, and then said that she hoped she would be generously spared. Countess Diana's protection was also part of Hestia and Irenaeus's plan, so with joyful thoughts, the heroine said that she would go out to clear her head. When the Marquise left, she was finally able to relax, because she would return back just in time for the end of the tea party. And then the Crown Prince approached Hestia while she was resting and breathing fresh air, which came as a surprise to the girl. The Marquise began to think about why Helios approached her, because there must be some reason for this. The heroine was in such confusion that she did not even greet the Crown Prince, to which he made a remark. Afterwards, Helios asked why the Marquise was sitting here alone while Diana's tea party was still going on. He asked if anything had happened between the girls, guessing that the heroines did not treat each other very well. And then Hestia asked the Crown Prince a response question about what he was also doing in this place alone. As it turned out, the prince was heading to a tea party, and when it was the girl's turn to answer the question, she explained that she had shown disrespect for Her Majesty and therefore decided to clear her head. Then Helios began to worry, asking what the Marquise had said to offend Diana, to which Hestia replied that she simply wanted to restore her husband's honor. At first, the Crown Prince thought that the Marchioness was using Chaol to fight Diana, but the girl made it clear that she was doing all this only because she loved her husband. A few hours earlier, when Hestia went to a tea party, a letter arrived at the Marquise's house asking a man to visit the imperial palace to discuss the rights to Ilion. Chaol understood that he would have to go to the palace, but as soon as he thought that he might meet Diana again, he felt bad. As a result, the Marquis decided to go to the Emperor on a day when he would definitely not meet Her Majesty, because she would be at a tea party. On this day, after a long time, Chaol was able to meet Emperor Irius and was able to talk with him. As it turned out, the hero was called to the palace not to discuss issues, but to tell him about his wife. And then the Marquis told the Emperor that although his wife was reckless, the man knew for sure that she sincerely cared about him. His Majesty noticed that this girl definitely loved the Marquis very much, which surprised the hero, because it was difficult for him to imagine that someone who was unfamiliar with him could fall in love with him. Therefore, Chaol still does not understand what exactly pushes Hestia to do the things she does for the sake of her husband. And when the Marquis was returning, he unexpectedly saw his wife, who, instead of being at the tea party, was communicating with Helios. Just at that moment, the heroine told the Crown Prince that she loved her husband. But His Majesty does not believe in this, because before the wedding, the Marquis and the girl were even strangers, and then he asked Hestia to explain why she loves Chaol so much. The girl seemed to have been preparing for this question for a very long time, answering it very thoroughly, fully describing everything that she likes and admires about Chaol. The prince had already begun to try to stop Hestia, but the heroine did not want to stop, saying that she had not told everything yet. And all these words were heard by the one about whom they were, and then the Marquis began to think that maybe the girl really loved him. Afterwards, the heroine and Helios went to a tea party, and even then she could not say anything to Diana, because her husband was nearby, so the remaining time passed well for the saint. As a result, Hestia decided that she would ask Erinys to find out public opinion about Diana. The heroine was already thinking that she would soon be home, when suddenly she couldn't believe her eyes when she saw her lover. Then the girl immediately ran to the Marquis, asking him if everything was fine and what he was doing here, to which the man replied that he simply had business with the Emperor, and therefore he decided to wait for the heroine so that they could go home together. And at the very end of his words, Chaol affectionately addressed the girl, calling her Hessie, which is why the girl's heart seemed to almost explode. But although Hestia was very happy, she still did not understand why Chaol suddenly turned to her kindly and waited to ride together. And then the Marquise also realized that she had not said a word to her husband about where she would be and where to wait for her. When the couple arrived, Chaol wanted to help Hestia get out of the carriage, giving her his hand, and called her affectionately again. As a result, the heroine dared, and still offered her hand to her lover, thanking him for his help. After this, the heroine was so happy that she no longer even remembers what she was doing when she arrived, and how she ended up in her room. As a result, the heroine immediately went to bed, leaving all matters for later, even her diary, which she wanted to put in order and make new plans. And while Hestia fell asleep with happy thoughts, Diana, meanwhile, was worried that she was indeed wrong, still thinking about what happened at the tea party. Diana thought about why Chaol really wasn't punished, and then added that she couldn't say anything in response to the Marquise. And after all this, the Crown Prince asked his wife that maybe they should make peace with Chaol, because they used to be best friends. However, Diana was not going to forgive Chaol. Although the main characters were indebted to the Marquis, she did not want to give up her beliefs. And Her Majesty eventually just started crying, and her husband immediately rushed to calm her down and apologize for bringing up this topic. The next day, Uros brought Hestia 2 letters, one of which was from Madame Harmonia, and the other from His Highness the Crown Prince. Although the letter from Madame was expected, the letter from Helios turned out to be a real surprise, because he had no reason to write to the heroine yet. The letter from His Majesty said that he had heard about everything that the Marchioness did to Diana at the tea party, so Hestia would have to come and apologize to the princess. Of course, Hestia was not pleased with the prince's order to apologize to Diana. The heroine even crumpled the letter because of how angry she was. And although, thanks to Helios, the tea party ended on a good note, rumors still spread that the Crown Prince's wife still despised the aristocracy, and that is why she arranged such a simple reception. The girl's plans did not include the Crown Prince intervening in Hestia's attempts to turn public opinion away from Diana. At first, the Marquis simply ignores them all, but she realizes that then she might actually be arrested for insulting the imperial family. Then, Hestia decided to get an audience with Diana first, thinking about how tired she was because of so many things to do. The butler, seeing how the Marquise's mood had deteriorated because of the letter, decided to distract her and cheer her up with all sorts of little things, such as tea or coffee. And while Uros ran for a cup of tea, Hestia decided to read the letter from Madame, and what was written in it made the heroine dumbfounded. Meanwhile, the maid took the tray from the butler with the words that this was part of her duties, so she herself would bring the tray for the Marquise. The argument between the servants was useless, because Hestia urgently ran somewhere and there could be no talk of any tea. And Hestia ran, as it turned out, to the Marquis to tell him very important news, and meanwhile, the Marquis was painting a picture, not expecting anyone. The reason for the heroine's haste was that she learned the news that the temple had begun to openly criticize the Marquise over the land, saying that Hestia was too blinded by profit and ignored humanity. Even if the nobles rebel against Diana, the prince of the empire and the temple will tightly guard her behind her. Hestia began to think about what she had against the temple, and then remembered that, initially, the most important role of the temple in this novel was to heal people, because only the aristocracy had doctors. And then the heroine realized that people would stop visiting the temple only if they stopped getting sick, and personal hygiene could help them with this. In order to share this idea, the Marchioness ran to her husband, explaining to him that if people start washing their hands with soap, which was intended only for the nobility, then they would get sick much less often. And if you start making soap without essential oils or fine threads, then it can be sold at a low price to the common people. It turns out that Hestia suggested that Kale open a soap factory so that as few people as possible would go to the temple, after which his position would begin to weaken. But, as it turned out, the heroine decided to sort it all out herself, without involving her beloved in this. But since she is a marchioness, she came to receive permission to act on behalf of Kale. And then the girl added that she also needed startup capital to open a new business, but she didn't have enough money for that. And then the Marquis explained to Hestia that this would not be needed, because there was a working workshop in Ilion. And then, if the girl wishes, she and Kaelis could go to the domain together. It came as a surprise to Hestia that her lover invited her to go on a trip with him. Kale noticed how this proposal delighted and excited the heroine, who did not even immediately believe that this was happening in reality. But due to the fact that the Marquise did not give an answer to the proposal for a long time, her husband thought that she simply did not want to. But Hestia immediately disputed Kale's thoughts, explaining her uncertainty by saying that she simply did not want to interrupt her beloved's rest. It turned out that there were rumors among the others that the Marquis was ill, and therefore his wife did everything for him, so in any case, he had to appear somewhere. After these words, Hestia decided that it was because she had poorly managed the estate, but her husband convinced her when he praised the heroine, because all the residents were very grateful, and Kale himself was grateful too. The Marquis thought that the heroine reminded him of his past, when he was ready to do anything for love, so he decided to respond to her efforts by offering to go this week. But there is an obstacle in the heroine's path in the form of Diana, who is waiting for an apology, and although Hestia would happily choose the trip, she could then get into trouble. And then the heroine decided that she needed to ask for forgiveness as quickly as possible, so that she could then calmly travel with her beloved. Diana greeted Hestia with the words that she did not even expect an apology from the Marchioness, so she was surprised at how quickly the girl requested an audience. But no matter what Her Majesty said, it was clear that she still expected what was happening now. As a result, the Marquise quickly asked for forgiveness and said that it was time for her to go, because she was in a hurry to go on a trip. But the princess stopped the girl with the words that she had recently prophesied for Helios that His Majesty would soon die, and then asked if the heroine had seen anything else about this. This question was asked because, last night, His Majesty suddenly felt dizzy and fainted, but the saint was nearby and used her healing powers. And then Hestia suddenly asked Her Majesty if she had problems with her superpower, to which Diana reacted very clearly, repeating that she had no problems. After this, the Marquise said that she had a vision that Diana's powers were becoming weaker and weaker, and soon they would completely disappear without a trace. The saint began to argue with Hestia, saying that this ability was given to her by God, so that the Marquise did not even understand what she was talking about. But the heroine explained to Her Majesty that she was simply conveying what she saw and did not embellish anything, because her strength was also given to her by God. Hestia told Diana that she did not even know how to convey this information to the Crown Prince, but Her Majesty began to say that she would tell everything herself, so let the Marchioness keep it a secret for now. Then the heroine reassured the princess that if she did not want to, then Hestia would not convey this prediction to Helios. As a result, the girl gave sacred advice on how to keep her secret longer, and then left with thoughts about how the couple of main characters would survive this crisis. Diana believed that she was special because she had been told so all her life, so she had no doubt that God would not abandon her. And the next day after that, as planned, Chaol and Hestia went on a trip. But they went for a reason, but to look at the land of Ilion, which is an important place of events of past years, where the Marquis fell in love with the saint again, over and over again. Therefore, Hestia was very worried because they were going to a place full of memories of Diana, which could cause pain to the heroine's loved one. Chaol thought that the Marquis did not like the place they were going to so much that his wife began to get nervous about it. Ilion has a rich area along a large river. With developed trade, this city is full of life, as it is known for its bustling streets and proximity to the capital of the empire. And then Hestia repeated the words Diana had said in the past, that in this place it felt like people were living and working to the fullest, shocking Chaol, who did not understand how his wife knew the words spoken by the princess. That's when the Marchioness realized that she had unknowingly uttered Diana's line from the original story, and then the carriage jerked, and because of this, Hestia's ribbon wrinkled a little, so Chaeolus immediately tried to straighten the girl's decoration, and then a stone fell under the wheel of the carriage again, so the heroes were shaken a little again, and because of this, they found themselves in an awkward position. And while Hestia was embarrassed by the distance Chaol was now from her, the man, meanwhile, decided to continue asking questions about the girl's strength, because it turns out that she can foresee such little things as ordinary dialogue. The Marquis guessed that the heroine had already seen that he was in this city with Diana. The heroes went to a place that Chaol called a place for entertainment, where you can do whatever you want, and then added that more than 20 people could come there and were ready to start working. The girl was glad that there was such a good place on their property, next to which transport was developed, and there was a large enough warehouse for storing materials. And then the Marquis asked his wife if she had gathered all the soap makers. However, they all expressed disapproval, because for them, soap is a work of art, and it is unpleasant for them to make a lot of soap at a time. Even Decamar helped the heroine in searching for artisans, but even he could not find anyone, so Chaol will have to join the search. However, Hestia began to try to persuade Marquis not to help her, because he might overdo it, but he noted that he should help her, because he is her husband. But then, the spouse's dialogue was interrupted to provide information that a visitor had come to the workshop. As it turned out, this visitor was the headman of Ilion, who was worried that the heroes had not arrived, and something had happened, because they did not arrive at the residence where they were expected. Chaol noticed that the girl was more friendly with the head of the city, and not with him, her husband. After this, the headman asked why they went to the workshop, and the Marquis explained that it was so that his wife could see the place that she was going to use. Since the heroine is going to use this workshop, the headman decided to prepare all the equipment that will be needed. All the nights Hestia spent without sleep were not in vain, because the heroine took good care of the affairs of the estate, and thanks to her, the embankment is now perfectly restored. After all, the embankment was destroyed by a flood, after which the main characters fell in love with each other. But fortunately, Ilion suffered minor losses. The conversation was followed by a discussion of issues